So 6B, briefing on 10 years of Austin's coal tar sealer ban, science, enforcement, and progress. Mateo Scoggins, Watershed Protection Department. Welcome, Mr. Personette.
And again, Mike Personette, Assistant Director in Watershed Protection. This is kind of a one step in a celebration, if you will, a win for the team, if you will, dating back 10 years. And in fact, I have a record here of an action taken by the Environmental Board when it was called a board on October 26, 2005, where a ban on what's commonly known as coal tar, pavement sealant, was referred to council, and my understanding was the ordinance banning it was adopted in January. So doing this presentation again, in part, we have a lot of new members of the new commission. Previous boards have heard a lot about this policy and the implementation of it and the benefits of it. We wanted to highlight that success. And so I'll introduce Mateo. Many of you know Mateo Scoggins, a biologist. He's been intimately involved in the science that went into this policy and has kept track of its progress with our federal partner, the USGS.
Welcome, Mr. Scoggins.
Thank you, Commission members. My name is Mateo Scoggins. I'm an aquatic biologist for the Watershed Protection Department. And I'm going to tell you probably my favorite Austin story. This was an epic moment in my life, and several of you were actually around during the whole period. And it was highs, and lows, and I'm going to try to go through it as briefly and quickly as I can. I'd love to answer questions, but I did provide some of the background in the backup materials, and there's a lot of other stuff out there now. I am but one member of a really large group of people that kind of moved this ban forward, so I'm honored to be the one telling the story right now, but there's literally 20 or 30 other people who could be up here doing the same exact thing. So if you have any questions, please stop me and let me know. So let's see. So yeah, this story, I think this is an opportunity, like Mike said, to kind of catch you guys up on it, but it is also just a really great story to have in your back pocket if you ever want to talk about how neat Austin is. I'm going to give you an overview of how we discovered this issue. I'm going to talk about polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which is a bunch of $3 words, and how they're important to this discussion. I'm going to talk about the source, a pretty intensive level of science that the city of Austin did during this that really kind of up the bar for what municipalities can do and should do. Then I'm going to talk about a little bit about the actual ban that went into effect and really an overview of where we are now after 10 years having this ban. The first ban in the nation, by the way, of this product or this type of product. So let's go back in time. So this is a graph you're seeing up here, which is the concentrations of those polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. So what they are is a pretty big group of compounds that are produced when you burn carbon. Anytime you burn carbon, you create these kind of complex chains of hydrocarbons, and they there's a broad range of them. Some of them are kind of aromatic and volatilize really easily. Some of them are real hydrophobic and stay in the environment for a long time. And internationally, people have known that they were a problem pollutant since the 60s. But what we started noticing, the city of Austin does more monitoring in the sediments in our streams and our rivers than most municipalities do. And we partner with other people, and the USGS actually produced this graph using our data and some of their data. But we also look at sediments not only in our lakes and reservoirs, but up into our stream systems. And I'm going to explain why that's important. But we look for these pHs because we knew that they were kind of a good indicator of kind of urbanization and other. At the time that we were starting to look at this stuff, we thought that most pHs came from cars, the combustion process of those engines and the exhaust. And this graph came out in a USGS paper in about 2000, showing this increase in pHs in Lady Bird Lake. And we were concerned about it. And this was data that was collected from the 60s all the way up through the 2000s. And this kind of trend was definitely worrisome. The values that you're seeing there on the y-axis on the left side go up to about 8 or so is what we're seeing in those. But a value to keep in your head is 23 parts per million of those total PAHs is a threshold where we tend to start seeing effects on aquatic biology. So we're well below that number, but we were concerned. Looking at other data around the city, we have monitoring stations in every one of our watersheds. At the base of the watershed, at the mouth, we collect these sediments. And you can see these red dots. Those are values that are over that 23 parts per million total PAHs that we saw kind of in our historic data collected throughout the city. And those values are of concern because that means that it's likely that we're seeing effects from these PAHs in our sediments. So these data all kind of were leading us to say, well, we need to figure out what's going on with this. This is something we need to be concerned about. We actually had a pretty high hit. One of those red dots that I just showed you was at upstream of Barton Springs Pool in Barton Creek, but upstream of the pool in the main channel. And a fellow by the name of Tom Bashara helped us look at that data and start thinking about where that might be coming from. And he walked up this small tributary that drains just upstream of Barton Springs Pool, an apartment complex up there. And he walked up that tributary over and over again and kept thinking about it and wondering what was going on. And noticed that there was a parking lot right at the very head of the tributary, and that on that parking lot was a lot of black stuff collected at the bottom of it, and it ran all the way down. And he could see it throughout the whole tributary. And he started wondering what that stuff was. And he'd worked in the construction trade and kind of had heard about this stuff called pavement sealant. Went to Home Depot and realized that a lot of the pavement sealants on the market were called coal tar pavement sealants. And he really helped us nail down this connection between coal tar and what could be moving into our stream systems. We went back on his advice and actually collected data. And what you see here is concentrations in those total PAHs, as we've talked about, that go from the Barton Creek down at the bottom on the left side of that graph. And notice on the y-axis that these numbers are at a logarithmic scale. So each movement we go up on there from 1 to 5 to 50 is 100 or 10 times higher than the one before it. So what you're seeing there is the concentrations in the main stem go up very dramatically as we move up that tributary, as we move in the graph towards the right, moving up farther up into the dirt at the top of the parking lot, and then we actually scraped some of that sealant in the parking lot, and the concentrations in there were upwards of 40,000 parts per million, so very high concentrations. This was the aha moment. This is when we said, we've got something going on here that is very serious and is a very potent source of these PAHs that we've been starting to worry about. Right about the same time, there was a big expose that came out in the Statesman, Austin American Statesman. That was for us a pretty dramatic distraction from the work we'd already started. We'd already had our eyes on this pavement sealant. The newspaper really did it was probably about a 2 to 3 month period where there was first headlines on the front page, and then after that follow-ups throughout this whole period, really basically saying that there was some really nasty stuff in Barton Springs and it was dangerous to humans and there were toxic waters, and that it was probably some decades-old fuel waste site that was somewhere in there that we didn't know about. We already knew that we didn't think that was it, but we'd spent a huge amount of time trying to deal with this media issue. But we also were getting right to work at really identifying what was really going on. And I just wanted to, if you were there, you remember it. I don't want to skip over it, but to me, it was really just a distraction from the science that we really needed to do. We started looking at the sealant applicators around the country. We started collecting retail sealants from stores around Austin and sampling them to understand what the concentrations of those PAHs were in these sealants. If you're not familiar with it, they put this stuff down on parking lots, driveways, places that aren't actually roads. They don't usually put them on roads because they wear off relatively quickly. Roads actually, because of the way asphalt works, it needs to be worked by cars. But in parking lots and driveways, if they spray the sealer on it, allegedly it makes them last longer, it fills up cracks, doesn't let moisture get in, and really fundamentally it makes them look pretty. They get really black, and it makes the parking lots more attractive. So at the time, it was a very common practice to apply these sealants once a year, right before the kids came back to school or right before you were about to kind of spruce up your lot for the spring kind of change in the population or in the customer base. This is kind of what you see down at the bottom of the parking lot. As cars drive over this, what we realized through a lot of different work was that it abraded the material on the lot into little particles, and that stuff quickly washed down away from the parking lot and into our waterways. So after that big media extravaganza, when we started really trying to we really knew after that we had to have really hard science to move towards any kind of policy on this. We realized pretty quickly that a whole lot of the sealant was going down in Austin. About 600,000 gallons a year were going down around Austin, and we got that from the industry here. We realized, as I told you already, that we were having this increasing trend in Lady Bird Lake that was on a scale to be actually causing kind of aquatic life problems within about 6 or 7 years. We were looking at hotspots all over the city, greater than that threshold of 23 in 13% of our waterways. We knew, after working with the USGS on a published paper they did, a lot of this work went on between 2003 and 2006. USGS helped us do an actual very controlled experiment where we applied the sealant, we sprayed it, and we caught the stuff that came off of the parking lot, and we submitted it to the lab. And they published that paper in 2005, which really kind of gave us the evidence that, yes, the stuff is toxic and it's leaving these parking lots. So we knew that it was a concentrated source and it was getting into our waterways. But then we also needed to know, okay, so yes, we're getting high pHs into our waterways, but what does that mean? So what I spent my time on was trying to understand the connection between these pHs and ecological degradation that was occurring in our stream. So we did a series of field, laboratory, and controlled field experiments to understand, yes, if they move there, what actually happens to our bug community, to the kind of the organisms that live in our streams. And we published those papers and definitely made a connection between the sealant and the degrading our streams ecologically. Once we had that package together, we were ready to go forward with the ban, and that's what we did. We took it to the Environmental Board and the other commissions, or boards at the time, and we eventually went to the Council in November of 2005, and they unanimously supported the ban. What it did at the time, which was, again, historical, no one else had done it, was prohibited this use of coal tar sealant within our jurisdiction. It also prohibited the sale of it unless you could prove to the vendor that you were going to use it outside of our jurisdiction, which I don't think we've ever heard of anyone actually doing that. And then it also kind of put the onus on us to enforce this ban. There was no kind of, we didn't get any staff or any kind of organization that was going to take on the enforcement of the ban. It was taken on by watershed protection staff, and it was driven mostly by complaints and by staff kind of review as they were doing their work around town. I'm going to talk a little bit more about enforcement right now. So that was again, it went into effect in January of 2006, and since then, what happens, we have a group of spills and complaints field investigators, and they drive around town looking at different problems related to streams mostly, but any kind of water kind of quality problem. They will notice if someone's putting sealant down, or they'll get someone who will call in a complaint and say someone's putting sealant down. So they've gone out and looked at individual parking lots about 1,500 times over the last 10 years. 606 of those times, either the smell or something about that scenario made them think they needed to look a little deeper, and that we have a field screening method that we used actually allows you to tell whether it's coal tar probably or not. So that over 600 times they've done that field test. Only 11 times have we actually documented that someone had actually put coal tar sealant down when they were out within our jurisdiction. And throughout that period, the violation kind of generally has been that we need to cap it either some way. But what's kind of evolved over the last few years is a shot blast method, which actually blows using a vacuum and a kind of a shot material like little BBs. They blast the sealant and vacuum it up, and that's the kind of the method that we're using now if there is a violation. There have only been 3 times that we've actually made someone remove the sealant, so that's pretty successful so far. That same group, led by Sharon Cooper, does all the education and outreach about the ban. They send out mail-outs to all the applicators and people working with sealants in Austin. They have a website, and we have to update that. We have alternative products, which I'm going to talk about, and they do advertisements in the media. That's what the shot blast machine looks like for when we do need to do a remediation. And on the left there is just one of their mail-outs that they do to the sealant industry and the folks that are involved with that. And so the best part of the story is that once we banned sealants, we were all very confident that we'd done a really good thing, but we really didn't know how long it would take to know what the effect of this ban was. And we've seen a lot of, we continuously monitor our streams and our reservoirs. The USGS does a really kind of amazing thing, though. They use cores to look at kind of history of sedimentary toxins or pollutants that have gotten down into our reservoir over time. And what they can do is they can reconstruct kind of, because every time that you have a storm event, you bring a new layer of material into your reservoir. And they've used Lady Bird Lake to try to document what's happened with pHs over the last, this graph shows you that from the 60s, that same data I showed in the very beginning, but you'll notice in this graph right where that dotted line is, that's where the ban was instituted in 2006. And what you can see pretty dramatically, it's actually about 58% reduction is the pHs have declined precipitously since our ban went into effect in the sediments in Lady Bird Lake. They published this paper, like I say, in 2014. And really that was the cap to really give us the room to breathe a little bit and believe that we actually did something that could be quantified and could be really pat ourselves on the back. So we're really happy about that. That's kind of the end of the science part of this. There's a lot. The USGS, Barbara Mahler and Pete Van Meter have continued to do a ton of work in this nationally, and there's literally hundreds of papers that have come out, maybe not hundreds, 10s to 20s that have come out in this particular issue of pHs and sealants. There's just a lot going on nationally that I'm going to kind of run through that a little bit. Austin today really is kind of dealing with this whole enforcement issue. We've kind of figured out a way to keep track of it. We're continually trying to understand the different alternative products that are coming into Austin. One of the things we've just kind of learned about is there's a product that is not a coal tar sealant. It's actually a you have to remember this. It's a steam cracked asphalt product. They're calling it an alternative, or excuse me, a kind of a environmental sealant, but it actually has quite a bit more pHs in it than any of the other alternatives that are out there in the 2 to 3% range. The average asphalt-based product, I'm throwing some terms out, so let me know if I'm losing you. When we first started this, there was a coal tar seal-based product, coal tar sealant product, and there was an asphalt sealant product. Now there's a bunch of stuff in between, but the asphalt sealant products have about 0.005% pHs in them. The coal tar sealant products are about 7 or 8%, big difference. And these new kind of alternative products that we're just learning about are in the 2 to 3% range. A township in the Michigan area just passed a ban last night, I believe, that banned any product that has over 1% pHs. So they didn't focus on the coal tar sealant issue, they focused on the concentration of pHs. So that's kind of the way this is evolving, is the industry's learning different ways to make sealants, and we need to be really careful about what they're putting in them and how it's getting marketed in the environment. Another interesting thing that we're doing now is that what we saw in Lady Bird Lake is very kind of affirming for us, but we still see hotspots in pHs around the city. Think about the way these parking lots have evolved. They are slowly wearing off over time. We're still probably getting legacy pulses of these products down through our drainage system. So we're imagining that over time, that eventually that'll work its way out. But we're still seeing hotspots around the city that are actually well over that 23 parts per million, and we've kind of just kicked off a kind of a focused source tracking effort to identify what is going on in some of those locations. So that's something I can come back and talk to you about later once we get that data sorted out. And again, we're going to be continuing looking in Austin at this alternative product issue and just where other pollutants that may be coming into our waterways. That's all I've got for you all tonight, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you for coming and giving us this 10-year update. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Brian Smith, Dr. Smith?
Yeah. Okay, one other question about the decrease.
Sure.
And, it's a nice chart showing, significant decreases overall, especially in Lady Bird Lake. But would you expect that with time, as those previous uses have broken down, that you would reach those low levels of the 60s, or are there other sources of PAHs that could be increasing in some way or another with increasing population?
That's a really good question, and that's one of the areas we really need to get a lot more sophisticated in. I think these alternative products is one threat. I think that because of the prevalence of exhaust and the other sources, used motor oil is a pretty potent source. I think we could probably get quite a bit lower than what we are now. I don't think we'll be able to approach those 60s numbers just because of the intense urbanization that we have in Austin and the growth that we're probably going to continue to see. But I think that's something that I really want to pay attention to, and I don't have a really good feeling for how low we could go, but it'll be a lot lower than where we are now.
Thank you.
Anything else?
One thing I didn't mention is that after Austin banned this product in 2006, there have been a number of cities and jurisdictions around the country who followed suit. And there's been some pushes here and there for national bans. There's a couple states that have enacted legislation against these. So it really was kind of a slowly moving train that we've created here.
That actually was the question that I was going to ask, and I'm glad you've answered it, because you all have had an effect on other municipalities, and sounds like even at the state level.
Yeah.
In some
maybe
other
not
states.
in Texas, but other states.
Well, but very good.
Thank you.
That's really good. That you. I mean, to me, that's another indicator of the effectiveness of what you've done.
I agree. Yeah. Thank you.
Not just your numbers and
Yeah.
all that, but the fact that it's traveling across the country.
Yeah.